Hello, welcome to JK'z Rewatchable Hour presents The Walking Dead Files. I'm gonna continue talking about the comics for this episode. I'm gonna start where I left off. Where I left off last time is Rick and Glenn were gonna go back into the city because of the attack on the camp. They were gonna go back in to a gun store, which was a little farther away than Glenn had ever been. Um, So they get a map and they're heading into town. Now, the issue is Glenn had said, look at all of the zombie traffic that we had come across where we were last time. We're gonna go deeper into the city. Rick says, well, I have an idea. He says, I noticed that sound will attract them, but that's not all that that promotes what them trying to eat us. I mean, they don't try to attack each other, and they all make sound. So he says it's got to be the smell. Have you ever smelled them? And he goes, oh yeah. Glenn says, oh yeah, definitely smelled them. So they locate a walker been that's been dead, that's dead, and they chop it up. They cut it up, and they use different parts of the, like Rick chops the hand off, and they take some of the blood and the guts, and they spread it on them, and they walk into the city. Now this obviously makes Glenn really sick. He throws up a couple times. But if you remember when they left the city the last time, they walked past one of the undead that wasn't moving. He was just kind of sitting there, and he didn't really go after him or nothing. And they said, well, don't, that they had decided not to bother it because if it wasn't going to go after him, no sense of motivating it to come after us. So they tested it, and Rick got really close, and the thing really didn't even seem to care. It barely moved. I mean, it made a sound and then barely, like, okay, you're one of me. So basically, they go into the city, go past a lot of walkers. They're able to walk right through them, and they pick up a couple shopping carts. And actually, they pick up a shopping cart, and then they go in, and they're able to break into the gun shop, and they get guns. But when they get the guns and ammo, they make sure they get something that makes sense. Guns that make sense. Like, don't take all of them, but take ones and make sure we take some that are compatible with what most ammo we can take. So as they were leaving, it started to rain, and it started to wash them off. They did knock over the shopping cart. They picked up as many as they could as Rick was fighting them off. Glenn picked up as many as he could, and then they took off and they got away. Pretty close. Rick got bit on the shoulder. And as soon as they got into the clear, he looked and made sure, and his jacket was thick enough to not cause penetration to his skin. So they were fine. While Glenn and Rick are gone, Shane talks to Lori, and I think he's trying to push onto the fact that him and with him and her and with what had happened, and she doesn't, she just basically tells him to leave her alone, and she doesn't want, that it was a mistake. And then Rick and Glenn get back. And then the next scene is a couple weeks later, they're doing target practice. Andrea is a prodigy. I mean, she barely misses after a little bit of training. She barely misses. Donna is getting better. They even allow Carl to try. And once he gets pretty good, he does announce that Carl's going to be carrying, but if anybody sees him pulling it, because he's only, he's only 8 years old, and if he pulls his gun for any reason, like it's a toy, let them know because it'll immediately be taken away from him. Him and Lori argue about this a lot. So kind of on their way back, Donna brings up the topic that because Dale and the two ladies are staying in the RV and she doesn't approve of it and whatnot. Then Rick, Shane, and Dale are out collecting firewood, and they're talking about it. You know, they're talking about the what the girls are saying about the young girls, young ladies living with them in the RV. And Rick says, "I understand, man. I mean, with all these supplies you have, I mean, we wouldn't be able to get by. So you know, if having them there as company, no matter what's happening or not happening, I'm okay with it." So as they're talking and they think they have enough firewood, Rick says, "Are you sure? It's getting kind of cold now as we're approaching winter." And Shane immediately jumps to yelling at Rick. "I'm not moving the camp. You know, I realize it's getting cold, but we'll be fine." And as Shane's walking away with his armload of wood, Dale says, "That boy's got problems." So then one night they're sitting around the campfire. Apparently Shane had shot a deer. So they were eating and they're just talking and they're telling what they did before. Rick tells a little of his story. Dale explains that he was a salesman, sat behind a desk for 40 years. And then when he retired, him and his wife decided to buy an RV and cruise America. And they were at a campsite. They didn't have the news. They were late to find out about what was going on. And his wife passed at the camp early on at the campgrounds they were at. Andrea was a clerk at a law firm. Amy was a junior at college for a physical education major. Glenn pretty much was a pizza delivery guy. I think that's what it says. Yeah, a pizza delivery guy in Macon, Georgia, and he was swimming in debt. Was thinking he might have to go, crawling back to his parents, who he didn't really care if he ever spoke to again. Now he says, now that they're probably gone, I kind of wish I could speak to them one more time. So then, what's his name? Can't think of his name. Donna's husband. Basically, he was a salesman, and he understands the swimming in debt. You know, the whole idea of swimming in debt and whatnot, and he knows all too well about that. I just wish I could remember his name. Donna was a stay-at-home mom. Yeah, Donna was a stay-at-home mom. Took care of the twins. But yeah, they completely understand about the debt. And basically they get to they they get to the last guy, and he's the guy who escaped from who would escape from Georgia out of the heart of the city during it. Yeah, that Jim, and all he says is mechanic. So, and Carol basically says that her husband who passed is the breadwinner. Um, she just did little things, nothing big. Apparently he could sell anything. He was a used car. He was a car salesman and convinced her to marry him, and that was it. So then, as they're sitting around, Amy has to go use the bathroom and asks if anybody needs anything out of the RV. As she's climbing into the RV, she's attacked and bitten on the neck. Then they realize they're surrounded, and they start fighting back, shooting. They're getting the kids safe, and they get through it. And then it turns out, when it's all said and done, um, Jim was bitten. Um, Bitten on the arm. Um, they bury Amy. Andrea has to shoot Amy in the head to to make sure she doesn't become one. Everybody has good things to say about Amy, even though Donna didn't get along with her. She liked her, and whatnot. Well, the fever is starting to get to Jim, and they're deciding what to do, and he decides what to do. Now, he hasn't decided what to do, but he said maybe I won't turn. In the meantime, Rick and Shane and Carl are out hunting, and while they're hunting, they get a rabbit. Shane shoots a rabbit, and Rick and Shane start arguing again about how unsafe Rick saying it's unsafe to be here, and him and Shane get into a big argument again. So next scene is Dale trying to comfort Andrea. She's just not talking to anyone. And then Jim decides what he wants to do. So before he tells exactly what he wants to do, before he tells everyone, Shane and Rick get into it again, and Lori attacks. Well, Shane attacks Rick, and then Lori attacks Shane and gives him a scratch on his face. Then Shane takes off. Rick goes after him, but Carl gets away and he follows. And as they're fighting, as they're arguing, Shane's pointing the gun at Rick and he's gonna shoot him. He said, "We'll be better off without you. I was doing good without him." And Carl ends up shooting Shane in the neck, and he dies. And they bury him. Well, actually, he dies right there. Before they bury him, they do a flashback of how Shane, Lori, and Carl are on their way back, and Carl's finally sleeping for the first time as they're heading to Atlanta. They're just outside of Atlanta, and they they end up making love that night. There was a one-time thing. She just, she was falling apart mentally. She, just, leaving her husband, going through all this, having to protect her son. And then the next scene, they show Shane buried. And a lot of them say things about him. And no, actually, it's just Rick and Lori talking. Like Rick says something, he goes, all right then. And then Lori's the last one to leave Shane's grave, and she just says, you son of a bitch, and then leaves. So now at this point, they're talking about Dale and Rick talk about the relationship that Dale saw. I mean, Dale saw the look in Shane's eyes, the possible relationship of what happened. And then like early in the morning, they decide to, I guess I missed the part where they leave Jim. I missed the whole part. I'm sorry. I missed the entire part where they basically leave Jim in the woods to turn and become one of them. He doesn't want to. He just wants to be left alone. Just leave him. I'll be with my family. So early in the morning, they're obviously getting ready to leave. They're going to go with Rick's plan, and they're going to leave. Rick let Carl sleep later, and he goes, you slept pretty late. I just wanted to let you know that if you ever need to talk about what happened, you can talk, just make sure you're okay. So then they took all the gas out of any vehicles that were around and put it into the RV so they could leave. And they head out on the road. They don't know where they're going. They're just going to look for a safe place along the way. And any place they see, they're going to stop and search for food. Well, along the way, they find abandoned cars, and one night, it's starting to snow a little. You got to imagine it's Georgia, so they don't get a ton of snow, but for them, it would be a lot, probably. They're pushing a car. It's just after dark, and they're pushing a car off the road. And they see silhouettes. They obviously think that they're the undead, and they're the zombies, and they're coming after them. And they basically stop them. Well, at that moment, a guy speaks up, and he says, whoa, hold your fire. And we meet Tyrese. We meet Tyrese, his daughter, Julie, and her boyfriend. Waiting to see Chris. So we meet Tyrese. And they feed Tyrese, they talk to him a little bit, and then they're talking about the sleeping arrangements, and Tyrese says, well, to be honest, we've met some bad people. I'd rather we'll sleep in the car. Maybe we'll tag along with you tomorrow. But for tonight, just the three of us are going to sleep in this car that you just pushed off that we just got off the road. So then, along with Rick, Tyrese rides on the top of the RV, and they just talk a little bit. And at some point, we find out that Tyrese is a former NFL player. He was pretty good. It wasn't great. He was okay, but then he got hurt. He was a decent player, but then he got hurt. And then he ended up selling used cars. They see a couple walkers at one point, and Tyrese and Rick go to take them out. Rick using his hatchet, and turns out weapon of choice for Tyrese is a hammer. And he's pretty good with it. They do like having Tyrese there because of his size and how strong he is. He's really good at helping them move cars and just helping out. Um, so then, they collect wood, they collect any food. You see an obvious connection between Carol and Tyrese. Um, Tyrese is loving the fact of all this canned food that they have, but obviously they're getting a little lower. And with Lori pregnant, that's not helping anything. Well, actually, we find out when they're on the road that she's pregnant, but it's not helping anything. She's positive she's pregnant, and he doesn't know what to do. And he goes, "Well, I'm asking you, what do you want?" So they announce it to the group. There's mixed emotions, obviously, because we're in a zombie apocalypse. What are you going to do? When there's no doctors, there's nothing. But ultimately, it's congratulations for them and whatnot. So then, they get moving a little farther and they find a bunch of burnout places, destroyed places, nothing helpful. And they find a little food here and there, but not much. And then as Dale's walking around, he almost gets attacked by a walker that's laying down. And they end up killing it and whatnot, but they realize that the cold is obviously slowing them down. So that's a good thing for them to look. But you also see how close Andrea is to Dale because she was so worried about him and whatnot. And then so then they're driving again and they're worried, still worried about, where are we gonna hold up? And then they pull up to a gated community and they're like, maybe, I think we've just hit the jackpot. On that note, I'm gonna leave it for now. I just want to let you know I did research and you still haven't read the comics and you want to, your cheapest way is going to be through the Kindle app. Through Kindle, it's $30 for the compendiums. There's 4 of them, and that's going to get you all 4 of them, at $30 a piece. That's going to get you for $120. I mean, it's not going to be cheap, but it's cheaper. If you buy the books, it's going to be anywhere between 200 and right around 200. I think it's a little bit more because I think they're like 59 for the actual hardcover book. I don't remember what mine. Like I said, I didn't buy mine. Somebody else did for me, and the comics are $4 a piece. So I don't know if a comic book store will sell them for cheaper or whatnot. But the comics themselves, at least book value, is $4. So 193 of them. I mean, you're talking nearly $800. So, but I did look on the Kindle app, so you can get them a little cheaper on the Kindle app as long as you don't mind reading the black and white. For now, that's going to be it. I'll be dropping another episode, and I think I'm going to go back and talk about the show on the next episode. And then in a couple episodes, I'm going to talk about early Fear the Walking Dead. That's what's upcoming. Thank you for watching. This has been The Walking Dead Files, brought to you by JK'z Watchful Hour. Thank you. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.